whenever I am looking at Mirena, because it's going to come up in the next discussion also, 7 centimeters fibroid, big uterus. There are some points which I would like to bring up. I would wait for the next case to bring that up. Okay. In this particular case, I would really like to reduce the size of the uterus first before I put in Mirena, and also regularize her periods.
Good, good.
Doctor, she's just 37 and Mirena is a good option. That much I can tell you.
Yes.
We'll discuss how we're going to use it in the next case.
Dr. Milan? Dr. Milan?
Yes, yeah.
So I just want to welcome Dr. Jadip. And one query is, suppose if there is an effect on the more hydronephrotic change, if there are more hydronephrotic changes, in that case, would we like to save the uterus or we offer the hysterectomy?
Yeah. Anyone is taking that question?
Dr. Alka?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Alka
And
can
as
take.
I said, this is 7 centimeters, and the hydroureter hydronephrosis is not likely to be more than mild. But as Dr. Jadip has already said, reducing the size of fibroid itself can be conservative in both ways. That it can reduce the size and it can, prevent it from increasing further, and the hydronephrosis may get corrected. That's one part. And the second, and she says she's young, and we already said that she has a family history of ovarian cancer, and Dr. Ashima has already detailed that we need to go into the more further details of first generation, second generation, third generation, because just a family history of ovarian malignancy doesn't make her one candidate for definite ovarian malignancies unless there is some genetic predisposition. So if there is a genetic predisposition, then in that case, of course, when we are offering her prophylactic oophorectomy, then saving the uterus would not be worth at all. So we can go in for a THPSO. On the contrary, myomectomy is one offer which can be offered to her if she's one person who's keen to preserve the uterus. But looking at, as we've been discussing this case from the beginning, we have 4 elements. Size is one, but she's asymptomatic. Family history is second. So I think more than the fibroid in this case, I would now be more keen to know the details of the family ovarian malignancy. And
thank you, ma'am. We'll go to the next question. It's a little late, ma'am.
Yeah.
Now the second question. She's 1, 48 lady who came to OPD with complaints of menorrhagia since 6 months. This is a real life case which we had in our OPD. So again, 48 years old lady with menorrhagia months. Initially, she was having bleeding for 5 days, but now continues for 10 days with passage of clots. Visited several doctors, non-compliant with the medication, and was planned for surgery. But then she came for an opinion. On ultrasound, there is an intramural fibroid which is becoming submucous, 5 into 6 centimeter in posterior wall, bilateral ovaries normal, endometrial thickness 12 mm, normal for 48 years old lady, hemoglobin 10 and TSH 5.6. Now, the first question goes to Jadip ma'am. Okay, on examination, there's nothing significant. So, ma'am, what should be done now?
Preeti, actually, I can't hear you much, but anyway, I can see the questions well. So, since she's 48, our average age of menopause is about 46.2. I am not much worried about the fibroid, but I'm definitely worried about the endometrial thickness, which is 12 millimeters at this age. Definitely, it is a danger sign which should not be missed out. And that's very important for us to understand. I would say that once I'm looking at her and there's nothing else except, irregular bleeding and endometrial thickness is more, I would counsel her well, tell her about all the pros and cons and everything, and definitely discuss about doing an endometrial sampling. Now, I'm purposely omitting hysteroscopy here right now, because if you're doing a good ultrasound scan and if there is nothing else on color Doppler or otherwise, or if there's the morphology of the endometrium is all okay, you could probably omit a invasive diagnostic test right now. Do an endometrial sampling, and if everything is okay, supposing it's only hyperplasia, then I just put her on progesterone, and maybe, you know, because she's not having irregular bleeding, she's only bleeding for a longer time. So in that particular case, I would just put her on Trenexa from the first day of her periods, and maybe, you know, continue progesterone for another 20 days or 25 days, maybe more also, because endometrial hyperplasia is something which I want to now control. And that's where progesterone's role comes in. I would definitely think about putting a Mirena, but this is not the right time to put in a Mirena. So I would give her, like, you know, maybe reduce the size of the uterus. If she is okay with GnRH agonist, fine. Otherwise, progesterone and maybe ulipristal or something to reduce the size for the next 3 months. And once all that is controlled, I would put her on Mirena. And when I put Mirena, I don't know, it's my personal experience. I am not sure how people are doing it, but because the effect of Mirena comes a little later. So I normally continue them on progesterone for a while, so that they just don't bleed in between, and the uterus is also sedated, and the acceptance is much better. So this is my take on this.
Yes, ma'am, very rightly put. And her histopath report showed secretory endometrium, and she was consulted for Mirena, and it was inserted in the next cycle. But the bleeding reduced, and the Mirena got expelled after 10 days with a big clot. And this was her hysteroscopic finding. She had a submucous fibroid. And you are so right here that they keep on bleeding, so they lose the confidence. So it's always good to continue the progesterone after Mirena for 2 to 3 months. By that time, so this was the hysteroscopic finding.
Add on, Dr. Preeti. See, working in the government setup is slightly different in the sense that you tend to get patients who are, you know, from lower socioeconomic status. Many of them cannot even afford progesterone for a longer period, you know, and they are very irregular with progesterone, which causes more often, you know, irregular shedding, which we used to call in the past, and that becomes a big disincentive for them, you know. So one thing which we, in the past we used to state, you know, and my generation people would know, we used to say something like hemostatic DNC. So because basically what we are looking for is that endometrial hyperplasia. It's kind of an ablation also. So for our people, when we are inserting a Mirena, because we know Mirena will work after a longer period. And then the second thing which is possible is because of the endometrial hyperplasia and because of heavy flow, the chances of expulsion also increases. So to cut down this, we would offer her something what we call as hemostatic DNC, followed by a Mirena insertion. And then when we tell them that this is the only month where you would require to have progesterone, and maybe the Mirena will take over the action by next month, or if it doesn't, we do counsel them. Second month also we can, you know, continue with progesterone. By third month, you will definitely be, you know, without requiring any oral progesterone. So that's one change, you know. Otherwise, we don't talk about hemostatic DNCs nowadays. So.
Thank you, ma'am, for input. And Dr. Rashmi, if you are here, what will be your take on putting this patient on mifepristone? Dr. Rashmi is here.
Yeah, hello, Preeti. What I gather is this is a submucous myoma, and you have secretory endometrium.
Not submucous.
It is intramural.
It's intramural, but it's jutting into the cavity.
Yes.
All right, intramural bulging into the cavity, and also you have got secretory endometrium. So
Yes,
if you
ma'am.
have secretory endometrium, I would feel safe to give her mifepristone. Again, the dose would be 2.5 to 5 milligrams for about 3 months or so to monitor what happens to it. And that will take, if you give progesterone, the fibroid is going to grow in size. Progesterone would be in order if you have a hyperplasia. There, then you have to give that only. But you have to balance between the fibroid going to grow in size because it is having PR receptors in it. So this is a difficult situation to handle.
Yes. And one more, she was also very anxious.
Can I ask one question, Dr. Rashmi, to you?
A good alternative over here.
Dr. Rashmi, you said in your lecture also, you said the dose between 2.5 to 10 is good enough. But
Yes.
there's a good amount of literature which does suggest that if you start with a higher dose and then taper it,
25.
you know, so we can go on from a higher dose to, you know, for 3 months, maybe it brings the effects faster. And then
What higher dose would you suggest?
so that may give you maybe a better
What
effect
is the
because
higher dose?
literature does suggest that. So what
Yeah.
would be your take on it? Because you specifically said 2.5 to 10 is good enough.
Yeah, so 10 is the higher dose according to my experience. It works pretty well.
So,
Yes.
Dr. Jadid, ma'am, would you like to add something?
I thought we can go up to 25 also. It all depends on, you know, I would start with 25 in that particular case.
Dr. Ragini, ma'am, what would
Preeti, in this case, as it was showing in your hysteroscopy, and as Dr. Rashmi, she has pointed out also, there's a bulging like a submucous myoma. So after starting a medical treatment, I will like to again examine this patient after 3 months. Because if it is a submucously growing myoma, sometime it does not respond to the medical treatment, and if bulging increases in the cavity, I will like to do a removal of this myoma. And as hyperplasia is there, then I will put a Mirena, because we are there to save the uterus, but conservative operations are there and they are very much available. So submucous myoma, and if you put a Mirena is going to fail. Now, this is my tip. First 3 months with the medical management. If it is okay, let's go ahead and examine again.
Can I add here? See, when we are looking at, I mean, I definitely am very pro non-invasive methods. Here, her major problem seems to be from endometrial hyperplasia. It doesn't seem to be. And endometrial hyperplasia, progesterone is something which you have to give. And the moment you give progesterone, and once the bleeding stops and when you withdraw after about, let's say, 20-25 days or so, medical DNC has happened, Alka. This is to answer your question, and it's not really required. I would do a DNC if she does not get controlled with progesterone, because, and I normally don't feel like giving too much of, you know, hormones, because this has been a regular practice amongst all of us. We prescribe hormones and these people don't take hormones well. They'll start bleeding in between and then we say, oh, acha, chalo, ab hysterectomy karte. But I think what the patient wants also is important. It's not that what I want. Whether she'll be able to come for follow-up or no, what is her other history like. I mean, in our country, a major problem is that our patients they want one-time treatment. They don't want where they have to keep on coming back. So that is where whatever Ragini was saying may hold true. But then if I have to do a one-time treatment, I'm 48-year-old, I would do a hysterectomy rather than doing anything else. But if she's pro saving the uterus, then I don't even have to do a DNC. EB will serve the purpose.
One more thing in this patient is she was very anxious, and we have to remember that she's perimenopausal also. So would anybody like to add something else?
Big no for your estrogen therapy, I can tell you right now, because she's already has endometrial hyperplasia. So
she's having too much of the estrogen.
And she's not menopausal, she's menopausal. She's still bleeding.
So, next question to you, Milan sir, what
One
other
important thing, Preeti, it would be to
No,
know where the
never.
site of the myoma also. If it is
No.
fundal, there is more probability that it is definitely going to become submucosal. There is always a uterine contraction trying to throw off the fibroid with each this thing, and history of dysmenorrhea. That would tell you more that it is more, what element of it is, bleeding because of the hyperplasia, what element is being added on because of the submucosal fibroid. But all said, all done, then in perimenopausal age, if there is a hyperplasia, we will first think that it is the hyperplasia and not the fibroid which is causing the bleeding. We would try to rectify that. If it gets rectified, it's fine. If it doesn't, we know that what alternatives. Simultaneously, as Dr. Rashmi has said, decreasing the size of fibroid is definitely going to do some advantage than disadvantage. So,
Thank you, ma'am.
we can think of
Next
all
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Maybe 1 minute, if you don't mind. I totally agree with Dr. Jaideep. If this is a 48 years old with a fibroid which is bulging into the cavity with hyperplasia, hysterectomy seems to be a good option in her and the first and
Yes.
one-time treatment.
Yes.
I really agree with that. But in case the uterus endometrial report is secretory endometrium, as you said, and the patient does not want, if she can be managed by tranexamic acid also. Nothing is required to reduce the size. If tranexamic acid doesn't control her symptoms, again the options can be of hysterectomy versus giving mifepristone. But mifepristone will be given only if it is a secretory endometrium. If there is any hyperplasia, please do not give mifepristone.
Yeah.
That's exactly, we have to look at the full picture. And I was just about to say, we come to my college and you see the patient wants that we do everything. Even in pandemic, they want blood transfusion and the same sitting and,
We agree, ma'am. So we move to the next question. It's becoming a very nice discussion. So, Milan, what would you offer apart from hysterectomy? Are you happy with the hysterectomy?
Now see what has happened. Already this uterus has been removed now by the other panelists, so hardly anything need to be done. But yes, one of the very good option always discussed more in the literature is about the uterine artery embolization, which is established, actually organ preserving and effective procedure, person observed very commonly in the Western world, but not very common in our country. For the obvious reason, the facility is not easily available at every district or every place. It definitely has a role in the reduction of the fibroid and can help a lot. But in this particular case, as it is coming towards submucosa, it is one of the relative contraindication for the UAE. In the UAE, they say that these are the subjects where we need to be very careful. Somebody the submucous myoma or the isolated pedunculated subserous fibroid, one need to be very careful while subjecting them for the uterine artery embolization. We all know the untoward effects of uterine artery embolization as well. So one need to take into consideration all the side effects as well. Otherwise, the best actually the drug for this particular woman, as she's having secretory endometrium, though her endometrium is hyperplastic, yes, we can actually give her progesterone and to bleed her. We can do the DNC, sort of therapeutic DNC, and she's a good subject for the mifepristone because though she's not menopausal, she's perimenopausal, likely to attain menopause in coming 2 or 3 years. So the time can be bought with the help of mifepristone. Nowadays, yes, as everyone said, though there is a range from 2.5 to 50 milligram, the low dose mife is working wonderfully well in those cases. So one can give a short trial, keeping into good watch on the uterus as well as the fibroid.
So this patient, we will discuss few more options. Dr. Ashima, what else can we offer to this patient?
Yeah, now since patient is really keen in saving the uterus, then we can go for the further management, which includes energy-based ablations. So in this, one option is getting a MR-guided ultrasound surgery. So here we do a mapping with the ultrasound and the MRI, and with that heat therapy, we can destroy the fibroid. But it is very time consuming, and the location has to be sorted. If it is a difficult location, posterior location, it is difficult to do. Larger fibroids will take lot of time, and then the thermal energy can be transferred to colon and bladder. So there has to be expertise. It is very expensive, and the results are known in 6 months, and the shrinkage of the fibroid is somewhere close to 20%. So looking at all this, a better method would be a myomectomy. As we have discussed that we can do a hysteroscopic myomectomy, this will take care of only the submucous fibroid. But regarding the endometrial hyperplasia, we might have to do a non-hysteroscopic endometrial ablation. But the intramural component of the fibroid will be left alone. So this is not a very good option. So what we can do is we can do a laparoscopic myomectomy to take care of the intramural component as well as the submucous component. But these are again, the better thing would be to do a hysterectomy rather than going around and around with these problems.
So now we come to Dr. Rimi. Dr. Rimi, what will you give up the conservative management now? And you will say, no, it's enough. Now she has been coming for 2 to 3 months with all these bleeding and running to us. So what would be your take now?
Dr. Preeti has already discussed, like she's a clear cut, I think, in my, if patient comes to me, I would like to offer her for hysterectomy also, because she as Dr. Jaideep told, Indian people, they want only one step treatment. Like either we will call up after 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and again the size of fibroid will remain the same, and she again a bout of bleeding many times. That time hysterectomy would be a better choice. But in view of this case, like she wants to retain her uterus, that's why like we shouldn't give up, and the counseling is very important, and we have to check a regular CBC, like her hemoglobin, whether it is falling or not, because if she's having a bleeding and along with fibroid, it could be she would be anemic later on. And we have to take her about the premenopausal symptoms also, like hot flushes could be one of the symptoms for her anxiety also, and other premenopausal symptoms. We have to take all these symptoms also into our consideration. But at last, I think according to this scenario, hysterectomy would be a better choice than all this conservative management.
Yeah. So in this case, we are of the divided opinion. But as I said, this was a real case scenario, and we put her on mifepristone, and now she is absolutely fine, and we were able to save her uterus. But agree to all the panelists. So now coming to the end of discussion, we will like one line carry home messages from our esteemed faculty and panelists. Dr. Jaideep, if you are there, ma'am, which size of fibroid is indicated for hysterectomy? There is no size. Jaideep, ma'am, there? If Jaideep, ma'am, is not there, then
she's there. She's there.
I'm very much there.
Yeah.
I said the way you asked me this question, right now 35 plus, or when the family is complete, size of the fibroid has no meaning. I mean, I would really look at it in a full scenario and then discuss, look at the age, if family completed or no, what are the symptoms, what are the additional other problems, and then maybe think about hysterectomy or conservative management. But only based on size, I would definitely not think about anything.
And any size for the myomectomy, ma'am? No, not from this case. It's a general question. What size you would like to do a myomectomy?
See, if I'm dealing with an infertility patient who's trying to conceive, you know, then the indications are very clear cut. Submucous fibroid has to be removed. Any intramural fibroid jutting into the cavity, or like, you know, which is disrupting, maybe you can reduce the size and then come up. Or any other fibroid which is more than 4 centimeters plus, which the normal RCOG guidelines say needs to be removed. Plus, the history is also very important, because if she has had multiple failures or she's had some other issues, then you can think about removing. But otherwise, fibroids, as per se, do not really demand a removal all the time, except submucous fibroid, where either she is bleeding or she is infertile.
Very rightly said, ma'am. Is Dr. Kala ma'am also there? I cannot see the screen. Is Dr. Kala ma'am there? Dr. Kala Vashish ma'am? Can't make out. Okay. So the next question goes to Dr. Alka ma'am. Is perimenopausal menorrhagia common, and is it an indicator for hysterectomy? The two parts, is perimenopausal menorrhagia very common? And
Right.
secondly,
Menorrhagia is common because we know, like, two ends of the reproductive age, menorrhagia can happen. At one end, because the ovary is still taking up or maturing up, and on the other hand, the ovarian function is fading away. So both the ends of the reproductive age, menorrhagia can be a common problem, but definitely not an indication for hysterectomy, because as Dr. Milan had earlier said, we are actually awaiting, we can say, menopause. But of course, all the panelists have already added on, we cannot just be looking at one symptom. We do have to take into the various aspects of her personal life, her risk factors, her additional comorbidities, and for that matter, like multiple problems. Like in this particular case, we had both hormonal imbalance added on to the submucosal fibroid. So we have to look at the complete picture of the patient. And one thing which I personally have felt in this part of the country, people are very obese, diabetes is common. And you would be surprised that even at this age, perimenopausal, when they come and we ask them to get their thyroid profile done, you would do find for first time that they were unaware of thyroid abnormalities. They turn out to be hypothyroid, and one common cause of menorrhagia, which you are incidentally picking up, although hypothyroidism may have been there earlier also. So we have to look at the whole scenario, not at one aspect only.
thank you very much, ma'am. Now Dr. Agni ma'am, how can we avoid so many hysterectomies?
Yeah, Preeti, it is a very, very nice question. As I told in previously, that to prevent the hysterectomy, it comes from our heart. And as a gynecologist, we should very, very sure that uterus is not a dispensable organ, and hysterectomy is not an answer. Today we have lots of medical management with us. We have conservative operations also with us, and hysterectomy should be only a last resort. And as Jaideep ma'am has said, it is very right. If a person is coming at the 48 or 50 years, again we have to think what that patient wants, whether we should offer the hysterectomy or not. So that is a question is absolutely separate. But the younger women, 35, 40, 42, coming to us with these type of problem, hysterectomy should be a last answer. From medical curriculum, it should be instructed to every gynecologist, budding gynecologist, that hysterectomy is not an answer for any gynecological problem. Unless it is a cancer, we should refrain to doing hysterectomy, evaluate every case judiciously, give medical management, go for the conservative operation, and only then go for the hysterectomies. Even for the grade 4 endometriosis also, if patient comes to us with too much of the pain, early stages 30 to 35, can we push it towards 40, 42, 43? So this should be, each and every gynecologist should aim for that. Only then we can stop the hysterectomies. And number 2 point, and this is my last message, that we should not do hysterectomy by the compulsion of the patient. It is better to lose a patient, but doing a hysterectomy for PV discharge or that bead scenario, the patient has said, please do my hysterectomy because I am losing my vases. So we should not do unindicated hysterectomy just because the patient wants.
I would like to add, Dr. Preeti, one main reason for increasing hysterectomies, and that proxy should take up. They should not allow surgeons to do unwarranted hysterectomies, because that's where more commonly the unwarranted hysterectomies are being done.
Preeti, can I just add here? I mean, I think sometimes we don't have to be very judgmental. Ragini, this is what I'm trying to answer you, because sometimes circumstances also dictate a lot of things. And so we really need to understand that, okay, we don't have to be dogmatic. I would definitely say under 45 or something. If you're looking at hysterectomy, please put some thoughts into it and manage as conservative as possible. But if it has to be done, I mean, there is no harm. Second very important thing is that the government itself, Abhi, right now, because COVID is happening, but whatever my interactions happened with the government and with many NGOs, there are so many of us who are not even, let's say, how many people are there on the webinar? 100 plus. How many people can you reach? There are thousands and thousands of gynecologists who don't even listen to even one webinar, and left, right, and center, they are doing what they are doing. And when they counsel the patient for hysterectomy, you will spend hours counseling them against a hysterectomy and will still not be successful. Now, that is the problem which we are facing. So the idea is Foxy has tried it, and this Save the Uterus has been taken up all, I think, for the last many, many years, but we don't talk the same language. The guidelines have to come. When the guidelines come, they don't reach out to people, and we don't read also. We are reading a lot because right now lockdown, otherwise we don't even open up. So our idea is that I don't know, I started it because I could do it. If I see something like this happening, I always send a personal message to the person concerned, which most of us don't have the courage to do it also. But we need to all do this, because unless and until we stop female feticide, we are now saying no to cesarean section. We are talking about vaginal delivery. Similarly, we have to also tell people that this is not acceptable if it is not indicated. So all of us have to be an army against it. It's not only Foxy Alka, because Foxy, we are all Foxy. 9,000 members of Foxy, but then we have to speak the same language.
So, madam, as I was telling, that it has to come when our medical curriculum, when we are doing our post-graduation, yes, from that time it should become that we should not the hysterectomy right and left for every cases.
See what happens even in the medical colleges. What happens? We are all in a number game. तूने कितनी hysterectomy कर ली? मैंने कितनी कर ली? And anybody who comes who's a potential candidate, hysterectomy is done or a cesarean is done, because postgraduates are fighting. I mean, I'm telling you, this is the truth.
Yeah, but
the
we have to
basic
change.
practices start there.
Yeah, ma'am, we have to change.
Practice what they see.
Yeah. Actually, the same thing happened. Especially,
graduation from PCI. Dr. Jai Dhal was the head, and he used to say, you are a good obstetrician if you are saving a cesarean section.
Yeah.
So that goes without saying. This generation should keep saying, you are a good gynecologist if you are saving a uterus. So
yeah,
that kind of message has to go down, deep down, from the seniors to juniors, rather than the contrary. So,
plus public awareness, plus the problems related with hysterectomy have to be counseled, which we don't counsel.
You know, but why I said that Foxy must do something is because I've been an expert in a court case where a complication happened because of a surgery done by a surgeon, and you are in a very odd situation at that place, whether to what to say or what not to say, because they are eventually your colleagues. But if there are no clear-cut guidelines who can do a hysterectomy, who cannot do a hysterectomy, and you will not believe the surgeon had a certificate from his head of the department of a medical college where he said they have done more number of surgeries than the gynae department. So that is the kind of
That is another point I wanted to bring in. I'm very happy that you brought, because most of the hysterectomies are being done by surgeons. And that's another major problem. And yes, most of our juniors who are not very well trained, they would call in a surgeon and then get it done. And so we ourselves are opening up the doors for them and telling them. So I think that also is a very wrong practice.
Yeah.
The worst is
Dr. Alka, it is so actually routinely. Yeah. Can I say?
Yeah, sure.
See, actually in Maharashtra, it was brought to the notice some of these labor women who work for the sugar refined factory, and they were, the hysterectomies were done just to save actually those 4 days of their wages, and which, was eye-opening for the entire government of Maharashtra, which was taken at the national level as well. One need to be very careful as far as the hysterectomy is concerned. need to do all those other options very carefully and judiciously, so that it's not hard and fast that one particular modality would be useful for that particular entire group of women. It is always various the whatever we have in our armamentum. One need to choose the right thing in the basket for that particular scenario, and yes, many of the uteri can be saved effectively. I think we must thank Preeti for wonderful webinar and Save the Uterus first actually experience to come to Mohali. In fact, we were planning to come to Mohali this month or the next month, but because of this Corona, webinar actually brought us to Mohali. It's wonderful seeing you all. Thank you very much for your presence and for invitation.
I was in. I just want to cite one thing. I was in Canada, so I met a person. He was a gynecologist, and he did hysterectomy on a 40 years old female, and his license was cancelled to a GP, and he was forbidden to practice as a gynecologist.
Why it was cancelled? Because of hysterectomy. Why it was?
Yeah, the age of the patient was
unindicated. So I can add one more thing, especially for the ovary. Always remember that you should not remove an ovary always with a uterus. Hysterectomy alone you can do at the age of 48-50, but don't remove all the ovaries also, because it is also a very routine practice, hysterectomy with the BSO.
Yeah.
It's very painful when you get a patient of vault cancer, for surgery done by a surgeon without knowing what the surgery has been done for, without a pap smear, without a perspective. It's painful, but these things have definitely decreased now with the fear of, I can say, medical legal implications. But they happen. They still happen.
Dr. Ashima, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, exactly. Even in our private sector, we are in DMC, which is a private sector. Our authorities do not say no to surgeons. They admit the patients, they do hysterectomies. So I think some guidelines and some laws have to come so that they can stop. They cannot say that the gynae department here is not doing surgeries. We are doing, they are even taking ectopics, mass abdomen and doing hysterectomy. So I think some law has to come.
Why we wait for everything to become the law only? This is something very wrong. We wait everything to become a law, only then we stop a wrong practice.
So
and that's why the doctor is always in the suit.
It's not always possible within an institute to have controversies raised just because of this, because actually there is lack of law. Because I know that it doesn't happen in my institute. That
know what?
My institute, but I know that around from periphery we do keep getting the patients still.
I would say that
I would now like
Ashima, if something like this is happening in your institute, admit a few patients and do appendicectomies.
Yeah, this is what Dr. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's true. The breast adenomas and
let us see what happens.
Hello, Dr. Jaydeep very rightly said, we should enclose their segment. And moreover, suppose agar we start the public education with the sequelae of the side effects, counseling extensive
there is one question that Poxy make a rule that young gynecologists become more efficient. My take on this for young gynecologists is that please call your senior colleagues to help you out in the cases, not the general surgeons.
Yes.
Start doing this thing, you automatically stop those surgeons to get in practice of doing the hysterectomy. But most of the young gynecologists, they don't call a colleague for cesarean or for a hysterectomy, they all call a surgeon. So this is the main thing which we have to nip in the bud.
We open the doors for them by giving the exposure and experience. Very rightly said, Dr. Rajini.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you all the panelists and chairpersons. It was a very, very fruitful and very healthy discussion. And thank you for taking out so much of time. And we would like to support Dr. Tarini for her elections. And thank you all panelists, chairpersons, and the speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a rest Sunday, nice Sunday with your family.